And this thought came to my mind of like, quality is a lot like barbecue in that it's not about perfection. It's about...
All right, welcome to another episode of Life Sciences 360. Our guest today is Andy Robinson. Andy is the CEO and founder of GxPaaS, a product that he's building to solve the problem around paperless validation in the life sciences industry. So welcome to the show, Andy.
Thanks, Harsh. I appreciate it.
I want to start off by asking you posted something a few weeks ago where you posted a link to a form, and the form had some very well thought out questions around paperless validation or moving from paper to electronic validation solutions. And you went really into detail because you asked questions about execution, you asked questions about creating scripts, post review. First of all, anyone that's listening to this, if you are a founder, if you're building a software product, this is one of the best examples of how you should be getting feedback from users, because you don't want to build something that people don't need. So I really was excited to see that you went so much deep into the form, asking very technical questions for people who've been in validation. So I want to just ask you, what kind of response did you get from that form, and any interesting takeaways that you can share?
Yeah, I think I've probably gotten maybe around 10 or so responses.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting is that form is an outgrowth from a program that I've actually just finished. It's a local, incubator. I guess it'd be more of an incubator, the CED Grow program based out of Raleigh here.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that they cover really early for entrepreneurs is this concept of customer discovery. So what happens a lot of times, especially people who've been around the industry for a while, you have an idea, you think you know the answer, you think you know the customer problem, so then you go build the solution and come to find out you had kind of a narrow viewpoint.
Yeah.
And so this concept of customer discovery is focused on the idea of go out and ask your customers, what are their pain points? Or what are their real problems? And more importantly, is this a really big problem that happens every day? Or is it annoying and it only happens once a year, so it's not worth solving? So I built a whole series of questions, probably about an hour-long interview that I was doing with customers, and I probably talked to 50 or 60 of them. And so this was a way for me to do something in a lot more compact form, to get it, down to the point where someone could answer it in a few minutes. Because these people I'm talking to saying, hey, can I get an hour of your time and just pick your brain? These are really busy people. And so that's kind of what led me to that idea. And then I've also used sort of the questions in that form, or that layout of that format, in really short conversations too. And so, that's kind of what led to that.
I know when we first met on LinkedIn and had a virtual meeting, you asked me similar questions around validation and what I've seen with clients. So when you got those responses, the 10 or 12, can you share one or two that really struck out, like a key takeaway that you were like, wow, I never thought about this. I'm so glad this person shared this with me?
Yeah, I think I didn't get any that were, say, completely out of left field.
Okay.
Like, oh my gosh, I never thought about that.
Mm-hmm.
But what I did get, and I think what's been the most valuable, especially in the format of the way I've been doing these questions, is I have a spot where I say, everyone thinks electronic would definitely be better than paper. So the natural question is, well, why isn't everybody doing it?
Right.
Why? And so I posed the question of, what are the one or two reasons, if you haven't done it, why have you not done it? And what keeps coming back is two big things. One is the concern around the complexity of internal policy updates. Because what you can't do when you're going from paper to electronic is to send out a memo on Monday. Hey, everyone, let's start using the new system. Just start typing up your protocols and design documents in the new thing.
Right.
You know, there's a whole ecosystem and a network of things that have to happen to get there. So you can't just flip a switch. And then the other concern was training. If the system, you know, it's different, so you have to know the new policy, but any kind of new software system you have to be trained on.
Yeah.
So what that has done for me is it's made me think a lot about, there's not a lot I can do about helping these companies maybe with their policy. Now, someone like you could, you know, so I can come in and help you rethink your policy. But when it comes to training, that makes me think, okay, I need to make sure the system I build is intuitive. Mm-hmm. It's easy. It's obvious. You know, very much when you download an app on your phone, you don't get any training.
Yep.
It's just that, you know, especially good apps, they're intuitive and obvious. And so that's gone a lot to inform how I've tried to kind of build the platform. And so, yeah, that's those are the two biggest takeaways I think I've gotten through the various feedbacks.
Yeah. And when you were saying about training, it kind of reminded me of certain clients that I worked with where they have, so you're talking about validation, but I specialize mostly in QMS implementation. So it's the same concept. They have paper documents and then they want to go to an electronic QMS. So that's kind of where my team comes into play. But I've worked with some clients, less than 30 people in the company, and they intentionally don't want to go to electronic. Not that they don't have the money, not that they don't have the expertise, or not that they don't know which electronic systems are out there, but they just feel that maybe where they are in their product development stage, they don't want to introduce that complexity, because once you have an electronic system, you're bringing a whole new set of supporting processes like change management, release management, training for that system, managing all the change controls, validation. Paper, on the other hand, does have all those components. You do have to have change control even on paper, but it's much easier to do that on paper versus, you know, electronic system where you have to have too many hands on. That's what I've heard people tell me, that they can do it much faster on paper versus electronic. Now, when they get to a point where they have 500 or 1,000 documents, then it's a different ballgame, because then they need searching, sorting, filtering, all these features that only come in an electronic system.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because my primary background has been in kind of the automation side of manufacturing. Yeah. So going into facilities and, you know, not only automating equipment, but in a lot of life sciences facilities, you tend to get a lot of skid-based equipment from equipment manufacturers that already had the automation. So we will put something over the top of that, like an orchestration layer for tracking materials or batches or things like that. And one of the interesting things I've heard through the years was customers did not want to go to some sort of electronic batch system because, and this is so ironic, the burden of changing an electronic batch record system or an electronic batch instruction or SOP system, paper on glass, whatever variant you want to call it, internally, the burden to change that was so much higher than the burden to simply update the master batch record and route it for review. So same outcome, same scope of change, but for some reason, and when you said that, it kind of triggered that memory. For some reason, people are so much more comfortable saying, well, I just updated a Word document.
Yeah.
And I'll route, and it's okay. But when I update something electronic, I think it's what people know and are comfortable with.
Agreed.
Someone else updates an electronic thing and they're worried something's going to break. But if all I do is update a Word document, well, that can't break. But what they're forgetting is the human, the operator that can make a mistake.
Yep.
You know, and so that's the funny irony of it.
Yeah. I've heard of that. And it's interesting when people say that, but I guess it's just a never ending debate because you'll always have people that strongly advocate for, hey, I don't need electronic systems right now, I'm fine. But it's interesting to see when they're actually ready, and most times the first electronic system that they do end up implementing is a QMS to put their documentation and training. So I've seen companies where if they have a good, what I call the magic triangle in the leadership, which is the IT, the quality, and like the business groups. So if those three players kind of understand a bit of how SaaS systems are or what validation is, they don't need to be experts, but they just need to know a little bit of how it works. And that makes it very easy to pitch products or to say, hey, you should go to this EQMS, because then they can be the champions and let their teams know, hey, we're going to an electronic QMS starting next month or whatever. So we're getting rid of paper. But yeah, it's still a never ending debate. I don't think I've ever met one person that said I'm this versus that. So
no. And I think you hit on the key point there. I've never been a straight salesperson, but I've been involved in the sales process, from a technical standpoint for a long time. And the idea of finding that internal champion is really, really important, because they're going to be the one to kind of present the case internally and say, hey, here's how this can solve our pain points. I mean, yeah, you're right. For a 25-person company with 15 design docs and 12 protocols, probably doesn't make a lot of sense and not a lot of changes. Yeah, it's absolutely right. But, you get to a 200-person company and some of these folks, they'll do it quick.
Yes. So I want to ask you this. I don't think I've asked you this before when we met, but when did you first get the idea of starting GxPaaS? Do you remember where you were? Do you remember when you had, I'm sure you've had the itch for a time, but when did you actually decide that, yes, I'm doing it?
Yeah, that's it's the classic founder solving your own problem scenario. Yeah. So you can probably go back to like the 2007, 2008 timeframe. I was working for a system integrator before, and we were doing a really large multi-year project locally. And I remember sitting there on Saturdays and Sundays working through paper protocols, wishing I was home with my family, my 1-year-old and my 4-year-old. And instead I'm up here doing this. And I'm like, this is just crazy. But at the time, didn't have the resources or the vision to do something. I'd say kind of somewhere around 2021, I'm working with a biotech equipment supplier. I've been working with them for, for quite a while. And I'm just kind of looking at their processes and the inefficiencies of it. And so this seed kind of bubbles back up. And it's around there doing FATs and things like that. And so it's funny, I actually remember like the day and the location, because it was just kind of, and it was December 17th, 2021. The reason I know that is because we were on our way to Mexico for a 1-week vacation where we were coming back on Christmas Eve. Yeah. So yeah, I don't have a photographic memory, but I can sort of slot it. And I was texting a friend of mine who's a consultant in the industry with a pretty large organization. And so they're kind of in a catbird seat. They can see a lot. And I was like, hey, if I brought a new paperless validation system to market, do you think there's room for it? Because there's some competitors there. There's people who've been around for over a decade, and they certainly dominate the mind share. You go look for a product and you find it real quick. And his response was absolutely. And so the next question was, well, don't the existing people already kind of have the market cornered? And he's like, well, not as much as you think. And a lot of their customers aren't super happy. And that was kind of okay, there's the opening. Because from the outside, it looks like the market's captured. There's not really room for a new player. I hadn't thought about how big the market would be. But when I hear those two things, I texted him back. I was like, thanks, you just ruined my vacation. I spent a lot of the vacation. And the funny thing is we're going to one of them, little resort places.
Yeah.
And I went to the gift shop looking for a notebook because I didn't bring anything to write on because I wanted to write up like the notes. I couldn't find a stinking notebook for less than $20. So I'm just having to type these thoughts on my phone. But yeah, that was kind of when it all kicked off. I was still doing my normal day job.
Yeah. Yeah.
40, 50, 60-hour weeks, and then kind of working on this off to the side and just kind of seeing through customer discovery and other activities to be like, hey, is this really a thing? Is it something? Is there really an opportunity?
Any advice for people listening who either, right now are working at a stable job or have a good job, but they want to start something on their own, whether it's a product or service-based business? Any advice that you can give to folks on how to find that, what they want to build?
So I think there's a few of them. One is the initial find what you want to build. I would, again, go back to the classic, what bothers you? Like what, I see these Y Combinator tech stars.
Yep.
21-year-old guys are like, I know how to code and I'm a great marketer.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go find a problem. Usually those end up blowing up spectacularly, even after $1 million of funding. Think about what really gnaws at you. But then, and this is the really important part, is go do that customer discovery work. Because what that does is, first, it's going to give you some really honest feedback, which is not what you think is a problem, but what everyone else thinks is a problem. And if you go out there and you can only find 10 people to talk to you in 6 months about the problem, that's the market telling you either A, you need to look a lot harder or expand your network dramatically, or B, maybe it's not really a problem. Because you build a product for 10 people, it's going to be hard to be successful. So those are the big ones. And then leverage. I've seen you talk about this a lot, and I've used it. Leverage tools to help you. I'll give you a perfect example. I went to Interfex, the big trade show in New York. And I'll probably get in trouble for this, but that's okay. I don't think they had any explicit rules. You may have been able to quote unquote buy the list of people who are presenting there, but I couldn't find that anywhere. And I can't, I'm not going to pay $5,000 for that list. Yeah. So the first thing I did is I'm a pretty good little PowerShell scripter. So I wrote a little script that went page by page and pulled down, you can page through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10. And I pulled down the list. And then I sort of parsed it up a little bit. And again, I would not consider myself a hardcore coder. I script.
Yeah.
And I pulled down the list and I got my list of 600 people who were at the trade show, not the attendees, but the companies.
Love it.
And then I use an add-in for Google Sheets that calls ChatGPT. And I asked ChatGPT, give me a 1-sentence description of what this company does, and if they sell to GMP manufacturers. And holy cow, it was, some of the stuff was just straight marketing copy from their website.
Yep.
And others was a really interesting synthesis of a bunch of different stuff. And I looked through this list and I'm like, okay, these are the people I want to go talk to. And so use these kinds of tools. Oh, and then the other thing I did is I made a little Glide app with all the companies I wanted to talk to with the information and the demographics. And as I went and talked to each of them, I kind of went around the corner and I typed up my notes and I was like, do I follow up with them, or were they like, get out of here, man, we don't want anything to do?
Glide is the no-code. Glide is a no-code app that you... Yeah. I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's a no-code app that you can make a little mobile app and then you can back it up, with a Google Sheet.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Yeah. So that's the big thing for me is after you get to those first two, use all these tools and technologies to take shortcuts. And at the end of the day, you got to figure out, is this a real business or not? Is there something there?
Yeah. No, I mean that's really important, because there are always ideas. I got a lot of ideas, I want to say, at the worst, probably the worst time when after my son was born, because that was like November 2020. So from like November 2020 to probably Feb 2021, so like those first 4 months, I was up late at night, obviously, because we had to take turns. Somebody has to have the monitor, and I would be up till like 3-4 a.m. in San Francisco. So I just had my office, and people that work with me know this. So I had like a desk, and behind me was a bookshelf, and I had one of the bean bags that converts into a bed. So the bean bag would be in the corner. So I would just be like researching, working, because remember, I had a full-time job. So I was working from like 8 to 5. So if I had to think something, the only time I had was at after 9 p.m. After the kid was in bed and I had the monitor. I was like, okay, now I can just have a cup of tea and think about. So that's when I found the lot of ideas, and that's when I decided actually to, like 3 or 6 months down the road, I'm going to quit and do something on my own. And then I started the consulting practice. But yeah, I mean, I had so many ideas. I remember one that I can share, and I did something similar to what you just mentioned. So I was listening to, I forget which podcast, but I was listening to a podcast, and the people on the podcast, sorry if I'm going a little bit tangent, but this is exactly what
let's go.
You just mentioned.
Is fun.
So the guy on the podcast they're just brainstorming ideas of how to build something and how to find. And they said, a great idea right now is to target people who are 60 plus and need help with technology, because there's a lot of technology, and people who are in that age demographic, if they've had a job in IT in their career, then they probably know things. But if they haven't, then they can't even figure out a simple, how to install a Ring doorbell or whatever, how to install a Google Nest, or the simplest of the things. They can't do it, or it's hard for them to learn and, do that. So the guy was like, somebody can build an app, and it's basically like Geek Squad, but for this demographic, 60 plus.
So Jitterbug meets Geek Squad.
Yeah. Something.
You remember the flip phone? They probably still have those commercials.
Yes. So I kid you not, this is real. If I have screenshots, I will share it. But I learned about no code that time. I learned like for 2 months, I was taking all courses on no code, following every single no code person on Twitter, learning all the tools, signed up for everything. Came across Bubble, which is a no code web development platform. And I even have the wireframes that I designed. I called the app Tech to Me. So instead of talk to me, it was tech to me, send the tech to me, and built the entire thing on Bubble. But then at some point, I don't know what happened, but I kind of scraped the idea, because then I started finding there were a lot of other services out there. So Best Buy is a really well-known one, but there's a lot of other apps and other small service-based businesses who have partnerships with big dealers, like retailers like Costco and Target, stuff like that. So it was as a user, if I went to buy a TV or something, I'm more likely to get that installation from the retailer versus leave the store and then try to find something on my own. So I got some data, and I saw that majority of the people do that. So like I would lose out if I can't get into that retailer's database, or if they don't show my app to say. So somewhere along those lines, I basically did what you're saying, just tried to build something over 2 or 3 weeks, got really far, And it was like really exciting. But then I'm like, no, I don't want to do this. This is just, it was fun, but move on to the next one.
But the great thing though, there's a couple interesting things there. Number one is you were able to do that for probably almost zero cost except your time.
Yes.
Which is something that's so different from even 10 years ago.
Yep.
Like we can validate these ideas so fast.
Yeah.
The other thing though is you talked about the idea, you spent a couple months just taking classes online and learning. My son has recently gotten into photography. And so doing sports photography, dog photography, all this other stuff. And what he's producing is just amazing. And literally all he has done is find websites and the whole network of people who do this online and YouTube. And that's how he picked his camera and his lenses. And I think about when I did it, when I was young, I went and got the Ansel Adams book and got my dad's Canon camera and got my 35 millimeter film developed at the drugstore. It's just so different.
I have somebody in my wife's side of the family, and he's also a teenager, and I forget what it was. He was working at a car. I don't know what he was doing. I think he was always fascinated about cars. He used to go to these shows he lives in Pennsylvania, so he would go to these shows where they have all the cars, and he would just click pictures of the cars with his iPhone. Then he got a camera, and he had an Instagram account, so he would post those pictures like, hey, look, I'm at this trade show in Hershey. Here's the new BMW 2020 M3. Here's the rims. And he would like go really and take a zoom of the red brake calipers on the rims. Like he was
real thoughtful about it.
And then that turned into, now he's a professional photographer, and all the automobile like shows where these happens, the car dealerships call him like, hey, can you come and do a shoot off?
Awesome.
Like he literally does that and post on Instagram. Then he now is also doing video where he will be in a different car with the cam, and then a professional driver, turns on the engine and then he'll take like a motion of that. I don't know how he does it, but he showed me some of his Instagram videos, and I'm like, crazy.
Yeah.
Just with a camera.
But I think the key there is it gets back to the entrepreneurship thing.
Yeah.
If you're trying to build a business or a brand because you saw somebody else making money doing it, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
If you're building a business or a brand because it's something you're passionate about, if this guy just really enjoyed cars and liked taking nice pictures, and happened to be good at it, or probably wasn't very good in the beginning, but kept learning and getting better. That's a lot of lessons there.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I don't think I met him like 3 or 4 months ago, and he's still doing that. He doesn't have any other gig. He's traveling. Wow. He goes to California. He goes to LA. He goes all over the country with his camera and backpack. That's it.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic.
So, yeah. And I wanted to ask you another thing. You talked about I think you talked about networking or finding this. You talked to a bunch of people when you were building, and somebody, like you said, texted you and said this, and you were in Mexico, and you're like, wow, thanks for ruining my vacation.
Yeah.
So I see that you're also involved a lot in ISP groups, and also you are in a lot of events in the Raleigh area, speaking events, or you're hosting them, or you're part of the management of those events.
Yeah.
Talk about like ISP, like what are you doing there? Because I know you're in that validation special interest group.
Yeah. So I'm in kind of a couple different groups, loosely, one very tightly connected and one a little more loosely connected. Yeah, I've recently joined the Validation 4.0 working group. So you hear the term Industry 4.0, and so then there's this term Pharma 4.0. So everyone kind of puts 4.0 on everything,
right?
But the big picture and kind of the vision there is that if we can capture data at all of these different stages, which funny enough, a lot of people are capturing data about things and systems and equipment at different stages.
Right.
But we don't do a good job of tying it all together. We don't do a good job of, even though people leverage, say if you're looking at qualification and things like that, we probably don't do near as good of a job as we could have, leveraging supplier qualifications. One of the big things for me, and it's going to be a big consideration for me, is thinking about, I'm building a SaaS platform.
Right.
Customers are not going to do an IQ and an LQ on my platform. So how do I interact with my customers and give a really effective handoff to say, here's what I've done to ensure that my systems operate properly. And, here's the sorts of things you may want to do as a quality activity. I think there's going to be a lot more of that going forward. Understanding for practitioners like you, on-site MES versus the SaaS, very different plan. So that's a lot of what, validation for a working group is about. I'm pretty new to it, so I'm still kind of getting my feet wet. And then I'm part of another little more ad hoc group that spun out of a conversation around computer software assurance back in February. And the short version is, I was like, it'd be really nice if we had, CSA has got some nice practical scenario-based guidance toward the back. It'd be cool if we had something like that for Part 11 that also maybe wasn't behind a $295 document, which is a whole different topic. A lot of us in ISV talk about is the gatekeeping of how expensive it is to know what you're supposed to do.
Right.
Again, whole different show. But anyway, so a group of us kind of spun out of that. Myself and Grace Shaw from Procella, offered to step up and help. And what we've actually started doing is going out and engaging the community. And I started with a post in one of the forums. It's like, hey, everybody, what would happen if the FDA came out and was like, that Part 11 thing? Don't worry about it. Just ignore it. Well, I'm serious. Because it seems outrageously provocative. Like, gosh.
Yeah, we
need that.
Yeah, we need to link that in the, you can send me the link to it. We need to put that in the show notes.
Yeah, we got to be careful though, because it's in the community of practice, which you have to be an ISB member to get to. But anyway, so basically I put this post out there and I backed it up with the idea of, hey, by the way, go look at 211, which everyone gets confused, Part 11, 211, which is the predicate rule that is, for drug products and things like that. I think med device 820 or something. I've never worked at med device. But the point is, if you go look at like 211 and you read it, what you find is it's got all the basics that you need if you're operating a system that's capturing electronic data. You should make sure people are authenticated. People are doing who they say they are. You should back up your data. You should make sure the data is recorded accurately and people ought not to muck with it. And so I got a really good response out of that. And it was almost like people kind of coming out of the forest going, yes, we agree. Now, is the FDA going to rescind Part 11? I don't know. Although it's been talked about kind of on public panels of it's not the craziest idea ever.
Yeah.
But the big theme a lot of people came back with, and honestly, I'm seeing it with CSA now too, is there's a lot of people who feel like Part 11 actually ended up contributing to more confusion than clarification. Yeah. Because now when you get a requirements document, they just have this huge checklist. And as a supplier, I'm like, that doesn't apply to me at all. Did you even think about that? No. So yeah, that's really interesting. And so as a group, we're kind of continuing to meet like once a week, once every other week, and to see, what are the sorts of activities we may do. I think we're actually going to be, hosting a special interest group in a couple months or something. I don't quite remember yet. I'll if I get the details, I'll send them over to you.
All right.
But yeah, so no, it's the idea of kind of challenging the status quo, and you talk a lot about it on LinkedIn of like, don't do it just because this is what we've always done.
Right.
You know, there's a, you know, think about it, distill it down.
Yeah,
So, that's kind of the spirit.
I never thought about the post that you made, that you talked about, like, what if Part 11 doesn't exist? But like, man,
Yeah.
a lot of, no offense, but a lot of consultants will be finding different jobs.
Well, so one of the key takeaways, or one of the key things I kind of posited in there is the idea. And see, I don't know if consultants will lose jobs, because
I said finding different jobs.
Finding different jobs, yeah. But the idea is, are you going to, one of the things, the questions I asked, are you going to stop making people log in with unique credentials? No. Are you going to stop backing up your data? No. Are you going to take off the audit trail so you know if something got updated after? No. Why? Right. Because all of these things are things you should be doing if you're writing a good piece of software.
Yep.
And so the business wants to do this because it's good business practice. It's good quality practice. It's just ingrained in it.
Yeah.
So the fact that, whether there is a guidance document from the FDA, not the actual predicate rule, which gets people a little spun up and confused. It's a guidance document. The fact that does or does not exist is not going to change what good software looks like.
Agreed.
Yeah. So yeah, that one's been fun.
It's fun, yeah, and it's it's a whole different topic. I mean, a lot of the things, like you said, are you going to stop doing that if Part 11 doesn't exist? The answer is no, because it's all practical. It makes sense. It is what you would do if you're putting your data into any electronic system. It's just common sense, right? But when you say that, people don't like it. One of the first posts that I made on LinkedIn that went, that was, I don't want to say viral. I don't like that word, but it was, a lot of people were engaging with that post. I think I got like 30 or 40,000 impressions, which was the first time on one single post. And I think the first or second line of that post was just like, quality is not something different. It's just common sense or something like that. I don't remember exactly. And I had people with 20, 30, 40 years of experience commenting. I had people messaging me saying, you are just disrespectful. Like, you don't understand quality. How are you even a consulting business in this space? And you're saying these things, that quality is common sense. Like, people have, PhDs and quality management is so difficult. And I'm like, you're not understanding the message.
Yeah.
I'm not saying everything's not meant to be taken literally the way it's written. It's just somebody has to say that to get people to think. I'm not saying it to literally to say quality is common sense, but I'm trying to get people triggered to think something different.
Yeah, and that's the spirit of what I wrote. And there's definitely a few other folks out there in the industry who will do things like that.
Yeah.
Like the person Grace works with, Dory at Procella, she'll do the same thing. She'll put something out there, a provocative question, just to sort of knock you off your normal day to day and be like, maybe I should rethink that. Yeah. So
yeah. Well, listen, it's been really amazing talking to you and learning about what you're doing. I know you were at an event in Raleigh, in Durham, like last month. I was going to come to that one, but I had to travel. So I wanted to come and meet you in person, but I'll maybe try to come to another one if you have. Is it Bits in Bio event?
Yeah. So talking about getting out of our network. So so Bits in Bio is a community that it kind of started up in Slack and has kind of grown all over the world really fast. And And kind of their mission is looking kind of at the intersection of software and biology. So you hear about AI-enabled drug discovery. That's kind of like one extreme. But then, the other side of it that I think is closest to what we do is like these really fancy new electronic lab notebooks, Benchling and Ganymede and some others. And so I thought the topics they were talking about were interesting. I like to read and learn about things that are, outside of my sphere and see if I can grow a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I found out there was a local, don't want to call it a chapter, but a local group that met. And so I started going to a few of those and engaging with the speakers and, chit-chatting with everyone. And then the group leader ended up moving away. I think his wife got a really great opportunity in Houston. So they moved to Houston. He's like, hey, you want to take it over? I said, okay, sure, why not? So we meet the third Tuesday of every month. We've actually got one coming up next Tuesday following, when we're recording this in downtown Durham at Biolabs. And usually we get a speaker, but I hate to call it a speaker. It's more like a fireside chat with a PowerPoint, because usually they'll get up there and they'll start talking. And there's so many well-informed people who attend. It's not a huge group, 10, 15, 20 people. But then it'll just turn into just like a dialogue and a conversation. And oh, by the way, I have another PowerPoint slide. Let's go to the next slide because I cover that topic here. But yeah, it's a really fun kind of casual group. The range of people there is all over the place. And I'm just trying to kind of grow it, reach out to a bunch of folks who are kind of interested.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out. You said it's on Tuesdays, right?
Yeah, third Tuesdays.
Okay.
Yep.
Before we wrap this up, I have one question for you. We're in the second half of 2023. What are you most excited about between now and end of this year?
I think the biggest thing I'm excited about, I think one of the obvious is getting my kind of vision brought to life, getting the first few commercial customers launched, because we've taken a kind of a really slow and steady approach. You can't launch a system that touches quality. It's like, it kind of works. Play with it. Yeah. So getting that launched, getting the first few commercial clients. But then the other thing I think I'm really excited about in a more general sense is kind of learning and understanding more about a lot of the new AI platforms and tools and how they're becoming democratized. 3 months ago, you wanted to read a folder of PDFs and summarize them with questions. That's kind of hard. Maybe 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Now you look on Twitter or Google search and you have 15 results of people like, I've written these giant libraries. Here you go. It's 4 lines of code. And so just the democratization of these insanely powerful tools is what's really exciting to me. Because you have to do that to get it to the masses. Getting it to a lot closer to no-code style, which a lot of people are building and experimenting with. So that's what I'm really excited about.
Yeah, it's something I've also played with, and I don't get much time outside of project work and stuff, but it is something at the back of my mind that I always try to play with, especially the AI tools and how they're being used for just simple use cases. So I'm doing a lot of research right now. I haven't posted enough content around that topic on LinkedIn or on other channels, but it's something I'm researching a lot. But once I have the engine ready to roll, then it'll be nonstop.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Where can people connect with you or find you after the show if they want to talk to you? You want to share your socials?
Yeah, I think that the easiest place to connect with me will be on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Just find me. I'm Andy Robinson. I think it's like Andy Robinson 2 or just Andy Robinson on LinkedIn. I'm in Raleigh.
Yeah.
Or we're connected on there. So if they find you, you know where I am.
Yep.
So yeah, I love connecting with people. I'm having more and more get-togethers, just having coffee for no good reason, chit-chatting about people who may or may not be in my logical network, but I love meeting new folks.
Yeah, appreciate you coming on. I know we were planning about this one for a few weeks and had to push it out. So thanks for coming. Any final words before we close it out?
I'll say one final thing. I was thinking about the other day when I was putting on a shirt that my kids had gotten me because I don't buy my own clothes. I hadn't done it in the last 15 years. And it was a barbecue shirt. And I'm a barbecue snob, like really bad. Oh, yeah. And this thought came to my mind of like, because you like to make a lot of analogies. So I'm channeling my inner heart. I was like, quality is a lot like barbecue in that it's not about perfection. It's about doing the right things to get a good result. And more importantly, not being afraid to sort of adjust your process as you go along. Play with the temperature, do this and do that, and understand how that kind of impacts the outcome. And so, but again, the general premise of quality is like barbecue. It's not about perfection. It's just about trying to get better. So yeah, that was something that just, again, came to mind the other day.
Yeah, it makes, I've never heard that first of all. So that's a very interesting.
I'll trademark it.
I was planning to end the podcast at this stage, but now it's like, might be a completely different, we might have to do a part 2 about why quality is like barbecue.
Sure. Let's do it.
It's I see what you're saying, because there's this thing about barbecue. I mean, I love barbecue food. I don't nearly cook it as much right now than I used to 5 or 6 years ago. But like all different kinds of barbecue, there are some common components. You have your dry rub or a marinade, or you have the protein and you have the fire, however you're using charcoal, wood pellets. So like if you look at the components, it's like you have the fire, you have the protein, and you have the marinade or like the flavor. But then when you open the world of barbecue, it's like every kind of brisket. If you get one from Texas, North Carolina, Kansas, whatever, they all taste different. They have the same ingredients. It's just like you said, what temperature were they cooked at? Was it high at first and then low and slow for the next 5 hours? Was the marinade kept for 2 days, or was it kept for 2 minutes? Like there's so many little things that people do with that, even though the ingredients and the components of barbecue are the same
basic stuff.
It's the same basic stuff, but the end product is so different.
But the end product's still completely acceptable.
Yep.
See, that's the key. There's not a single, like you said, different briskets. And different pork shoulders, different ribs. Now there are some that are just flat out wrong, and we can talk about that.
Yeah, and it also matters on like the quality of the protein. Like if you're doing organic versus grass fed, or organic versus not. But in theory, it's you have your cooking source, which is propane, charcoal, or wood pellets, or whatever. You have your protein, and you have some of the flavor, either that's dry or marinade. I don't think there's anything more to barbecue than these 3, but it's still like such a complex topic for people who love it.
Yeah.
They spend hours and hours going to competitions and competing, food trucks, that it's just a whole world of people, especially in the US. I was like, wow, people love barbecue in the US.
It's and especially in Texas.
Yeah.
I lived there for 5 years, though. That's all.
All right. Thank you, Andy. I love talking to you.
Cool.
I'll be rooting for you. Wish you, a lot of success in the second half of 2023. If you ever need any help, let me know. And for folks listening, if you've experimented with paperless validation products, or you're passionate about validation and you just want to bounce off ideas, reach out to Andy, have a conversation. I completely believe what you're building. And I think from what I've seen so far, what you've shared, and I know we can talk more later, but it's really your vision and what you're trying to do and how methodical you are with the process. I'm pretty sure that the outcome and the end product is going to be significantly better or comparable to all the other products out there. So I'm rooting for you.
That's the goal. Yeah. That's the goal.
Thank you. Have a good one.
All right. Bye. Thanks, Ars. Appreciate it. Take care. Bye-bye.